Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Shadow of the Erdtree. Today we're covering the top 15 picks for the arcane weapons from the whole game, so mixing in some of the best picks from the DLC. We're comparing them to one another, so if it's even here in the video, it's clearly a top tier choice for the stat type, though the top options do have some gaps between them. Based on that, we do have S plus tier, and it will go all the way down to C tier to showcase those differences. Remember though, this is a PvE list, but with that said, let's begin. Starting with more of an acknowledgement since it's not on this tier list, it's the Grave Scythe. I just need to reference that this is incredible, but ideally in keen, so dex scaling, and then use the Blood Flame buff to really make it work. Then you've got an incredible bleed build-up weapon with a suitable fast successive hit ash. It is absolutely top tier for that purpose. But as it is not arcane, it's dex, it's not here on this list. But there's that reference. Now let's truly begin at the bottom here in C tier with a new weapon, the Flowerstone Gavel. This hammer type weapon is pretty bland. However, it does have some pierce damage potential behind it, which is neat. It's not until we look at the Ash of War that things really change. With that, we're able to do this long range lightning bolt attack, and it's quick and effective and spammable. You can in fact charge it up to make it hit harder. The damage of that is really good, and even better because it makes all lightning damage you deal while they're afflicted by the debuff it applies deal even more damage. So the first Ash, a quick one to apply the debuff, then charge Ashes after that, and the damage is seriously respectable. This should work really well in any lightning based build, but the problem is you're committing to something like strength and arcane. What is lightning based on? Faith. Fully faith. So it just doesn't have functional synergy with normal lightning builds at all. It's very confusing in that way, but the reason it's here pretty much is the Ash of War damage. It's still very respectable as an arcane weapon. A little bit of a push in the right direction, maybe some rebalancing, I don't know. Give it some actual base lightning damage instead of just physical. There is potential here, but for now, it's just a very good Ash of War spammer. Next up, down in C tier, we have the Poison Hand, which you can use in two ways, directly or indirectly. That is because when you get a poison proc, it gives you an AR boost. So you could run any poison-based build and have this in the offhand equipped just for that proc to get the extra AR like it's a talisman. Alternatively, you can directly use it though because it has this unique palm strike Ash of War that instantly applies a huge buildup of poison. It's also deadly poison, so even more damaging than normal. I've done a build where I use them as my main weapon, instantly applying the poison by using the Ash of War and then using charged heavies to break posture super effectively and punish with criticals. So as a weapon, it's solid, and as an offhand just AR booster option for a poison build, it's really nice to have, but obviously not crazy. What is a lot more noticeably good though is the new bloodfiends fork, which is essentially just a spear. This competes directly with a top tier dex weapon, or I guess arcane if you're running that way, the cross naginatus, which are a different spear type working very much the same. This weapon though comes with natural bleed, natural arcane scaling, and yet is infusible and buffable. It's like an alternative spear version of the crazy Bloodfiend's arm. So the bleed build-up here is nuts. The raw damage is really respectable. If you fully commit to arcane and put it into a cult, it gets absolutely busted. So it's very one-for-one competitive with the cross naginatas, which are very good weapons. And it's debatable if these could even be better. So they absolutely must be on the list, but only B tier because I find the moveset still a bit slow, and when you're running seppuku, you have to hurt yourself quite bad, and the buff has a short duration. It's not as effective as it once was. It's awkward to have to, do 6 things before you do every fight, and that holds it back. Next in B tier then, we have the classic reduvia dagger, although ideally you run this in power stance. Daggers had some love over multiple patches, and essentially the standing light combos become very quick and very effective at dealing successive hits, and with this weapon, bleed build-up. It also comes with an Ash of War that's not unique to it, where you do this kind of medium range blood shot, ideally done at shotgun range though, so you hit with a dagger at the same time. This has great bleed build-up and damage potential behind it, so between the mix of that and the standing light combo, you have a lot of DPS potential here. The reason it's in B tier though is because this DLC has a lot of bosses that are going to need you to stagger them to get punish windows. They do huge combos, small delays, then another combo. So getting off a full light attack combo that has no posture break behind it is quite hard. By comparison, your fist weapons are able to do heavy charge attacks and then get off the standing light combos. Still, there's really high DPS potential here. You could argue for A tier based purely on that if you really like daggers, but their awkward range and complete lack of poise does hold them back. Next up in B tier, we have the regalia of eochaid, which is, of course, absolutely outclassed by a weapon that does much the same thing, basically the same Ash of War. It's that ranged corkscrew attack that deals big ticking up successive damage, and then you have the slam at the end. The reason this is completely outscaled by another weapon that does the same thing is the fact that it has much lower AR as a straight sword compared to the greatsword alternative. So you're simply hitting less per hit, and therefore overall the DPS is lower. That is not to say that this isn't clearly good, and if you use them in power stance, the power stance straight sword moveset is very solid too. But it is obviously outclassed by another one that's very similar to it, we'll soon be talking about. Still, I like them, and if you prefer straight swords for whatever reason, then it's a good pick. Also in B tier then, we have the Rivers of Blood, which probably would have been in C tier until this DLC. That is because of the new armor set. That's Ansbach armor set, which increases the output of blood skills and dynasty skills per each piece of armor that you're wearing of his set. So with the white mask equip, we can equip 3 of them, and it gives this nice boost to the damage of this Ash of War for the Rivers of Blood. It's definitely taken many hits over time, whether it's the damage, the way the Ash of War works, you need to be up close at it with the sword at the same time, the poise in that relation, but it's still very effective. The range you can do this Ash of War is really good, and if you can get up close and do it at shotgun style, the DPS is still very respectable. But obviously, it's held back by the combo being long and all those short punish windows not allowing for that. The range of the Ash though makes up for that and opens up other punish opportunities, so it's worth thinking about more in this DLC than before. Also down in B tier, but to be clear, at the bottom of B tier, it's Morgott's Cursed Sword. This is a great curved sword and is absolutely a killer against targets that can be staggered by its Ash of War combo. That was buffed over time in general like the weapon type. The Ash of War compared to the past is faster, so you can combo it into itself even quicker, dealing hit after hit, explosive arcane fire buildup, and that can stagger as well. So you spam it into a target and you eventually get a stagger, and that is pretty damn good, especially with the bleed. But the bleed buildup isn't incredible, the successive hits aren't incredible, you're getting 4-ish. It's still hard to land it before, say, a DLC boss returns fire. So using that dash forward to get a little bit extra time on your punish and your combo is important, but the raw damage of the weapon isn't insane. Still, it has nice range, it's a cool weapon, and it's a unique playstyle, but hell, you could argue for C tier on this one. Moving up though, we come to A tier, starting with the Ancient Meteoric or Greatsword, which is a colossal sword that has arcane scaling, but kinda not really. Very quickly, most of the damage enhancement comes from AR, the actual raw damage of the weapon. So normal damage buffs and scaling the strength, that's going to be the way to do this. However, it does scale a bit with Arcane. As a physical magic weapon, it's quite strange. Still, why it's here and why it's so high on the list comes down to its Ash of War. You've got a slow, heavy-hitting colossal sword, but with this one, quite a thrusty-based moveset. Piercing through the target's really effective, and the range you get on that's really nice too. The Ash of War has you lunge forward and poke with a heavy hit. You can follow that up with the Explosion of Light. Mainly though, the thrust is insane. From serious range, you can suddenly be on a target, dealing big poise damage and a nice hit. This opens up new windows of opportunity for punish in a boss fight that otherwise don't exist for this weapon type. That hard carries its value, but it's obviously limited by its awkward nature. Strength and Arcane, again, doesn't synergize with very much. The fact that it's even an arcane weapon at all is quite weird, but that Ash of War for a colossal sword, top tier, and that's why it's A tier. Also A tier though, for sure, is Eleonora's poleblade. As a twin blade, it's solid. You've got physical, fire, and of course bleed build up potential here as you use the Cursed Blood on the Ash of War. That combo's a bit awkward because it has you dash forward, do this combo, dash back. Anything that's kind of flowy like that leaves you with little control during it can be awkward at the best of times. But there's no denying that a twin blade like this, between the Ash of War and the base moveset, can attack very quick. Hell, if you were to power stance these and then spam jump attacks, the amount of successive hits you can get off that, just that, would be super respectable. But then you have the Ash of War, which obviously does a lot of damage and is also very buffable. So whether you're two-handing it, power stancing it, or relying on the Ash of War, all of it is still very effective to this day. Finally, for A tier, we have the classic bloody helice, which is a heavy thrusting sword that, has taken hits and hits over time and yet remains still an incredible choice, especially for boss killing. I compare this almost to the Morgott sword, it's just better. You got bleed build up on a slower weapon that's usually not building it up as quick, but the heavy hits and stagger value behind that is actually really respectable. And as a thrusting weapon, we can get incredible counterattack damage using that counterattack damage talisman. The Ash itself gives you iframes and a backwards evade. You come in for a big hefty hit that builds up great stagger, and then you can follow it with a double thrust after that to really get some successive hits, bleed build up, and again stagger. So it's incredibly easy to punish even small windows on this and create new windows by using the Ash to evade and then attack during their own combo. I still really like this weapon for the raw damage, again the bleed, and the stagger in particular for this thrusting counter playstyle. So don't sleep on it, it's still very good. Moving up a tier again then, we're now in S tier with a new weapon, of course. It's the Bloodfiend's Arm, this colossal weapon. With the blandest playstyle and moveset possible, you're essentially slamming it down and that's it. With heavy attacks or jump attacks when you need to. Each heavy attack builds up a huge amount of bleed buildup, even post-nerf after they did this little patch to fix it. To give you a vague example, it's the difference of say 320 to 280. It's still really high and still one of the best weapons in the whole game. You don't run any strength in it really, just the base amount to equip it, and then you maximize Arcane to maximize the damage and the bleed buildup like it's an occult weapon. But we actually run it on blood for the max bleed buildup. To this day, I'm still literally 3-shotting bosses that take even a little bit of killing for other weapons. The stagger build-up's obviously insane, and the control you get is super respectable. There's lots of ways you could run it, whether you're buffing it with Royal Knight's Resolve or just slapping on Endure so you can just spam heavies and turn your brain off. It's very effective, very straightforward, very uninteresting, but it's definitely S tier. Also still S tier then, we have the Marais Executioner Sword. It's literally the sword I was talking about that outclasses the regalia of eochaid. As a heavier hitting weapon, focusing on strength and arcane, the ticks on that corkscrew spin hit harder, build up faster, leading to higher DPS. Also, with way more stagger potential behind it. So it's just straight up significantly better, and as you can see, it's still an absolute boss killer to this day. The downside of these weapons though, is the Asher Wall requires you to hold yourself in place and channel that out. That can be awkward in the DLC, but there's still absolutely punish windows to allow for that. Then the base hits are still good, and then, you know, playing to build heavy attacks and build up more stagger, maybe to not even take a critical and do another Ash instead, that's a viable thing to do too. So the burst is still absolutely insane, even if it's a medium to close range option, looking for those punish windows when you can. It is chargeable though, so you can do the quick weaker version just to get successive hits off every now and then if you need to. But it's mostly the same as it was, and still definitely S tier. Not the same as it was though, is Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear, which the Blood Moon ritual did take a nerf in the lead up to the DLC. Essentially you've got smaller status build-up, but it's still absolutely broken. With this, you must go into a heavy buffing playstyle before you really get into it, because it's living and dying by that Asher Wall. If you can get the full 3-hit combo off, it's going to be comical damage, easily 20 to 30k in a proc, but at the same time, it is hard to get it off because you're so interruptible and exposed. And in this DLC, you know, bosses with their combos, they're going to punish that. Thankfully, the huge AoE range allows you to get those punish windows, at least getting off the first and second part consistently. When you use it, that'll buff it up with the Cursed Blood Flame. Then you can just use it as a reliable, solid great spear with great range, heavy hits, stagger build up, and that's still really good too. It's not as good as it once was, obviously, but not that much worse at the same time. So if you're still thinking about it, yeah, try it. But above everything, in S+ tier, is the Bandit Curved Sword and the Scavenger's Curved Sword for the Occult Bleed setup with Seppuku. This is one of the strongest things in the entire game, and it's still absolutely busted to this day. They've done many little changes to say status build up and power stance and so on, and it means absolutely nothing to this setup. But why bandits and scavengers? Well, it's because either one you use is going to be absolutely nuts. Technically, if you're having really high stats and you're someone that really over levels, the bandits is going to give you more value, and the scavengers by comparison should give you more value at lower stats. But since you can only get one scavenger sword per playthrough, I like the idea of having one bandit, one scavengers as the perfect mix. In any case, you run them both in occult, you maximize your arcane to like 80, you run seppuku for the short-lived really effective buff, you set that up before every real fight, and then go to town by spamming jump attacks specifically. That's because you do a bunch of attacks in one go, and you can repeatedly do it super quick. It's absolutely disgusting how effective this is, and it can be a pain in the butt to set up before the fight. You got a lot of buffs to get on and do in the right order, but obviously the result is worth it. So either setup you want to run, it's going to be top tier. But there you have it, that's another list down with the new additions from the DLC lineup. Let us know what you think of our Arcane rankings. Maybe there's some weapons you might have included yourself, but if this was useful to you, please do drop a like, we put a lot of work into them. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.